Brenda has a master's degree in history and museum studies from the University of Central Oklahoma here in Edmond. She received museum training at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City and the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. She currently serves on several boards, commissions, and committees and is often in Washington, D.C., advocating for Oklahoma museums, which was just a couple of days ago. So please welcome Brenda Granger.
Thank you, Amy. And I'm so glad to see everyone. And literally, I got back last night from DC. Good news is both of our senators love museums and they're doing things to support them. We're working on all the reps. And so we might need some advocacy help on that, but they're all wonderful. Truly at OMA, the Oklahoma Museums Association, this is what we like to say. It's a great day at OMA. And so today I'm saying it's a great day in WPA, right? In this WPA building, it's exactly right. And the mission of the Oklahoma Museums Association is to empower Oklahoma museums. We have over 500 museums in our great state. And if you go to okmuseums.org, you can see the entire list. You can sort it by district, by museum name, or by city that they are. And many of our museums are located in historic buildings and several in WPA buildings. I know I've sent emails to many in this room here saying, please come, but you were already signed up, and I was so happy to know that, and that is wonderful. I would like to say congratulations to Amy and to the Edmond History Museum and the entire community of Edmond for receiving this privilege of hosting this symposium. It was competitive, and that is just so wonderful. And so also I would like to say congratulations to all of you for having the foresight to know to start planning now, because as Trait said earlier, I'm on the Centennial Commission also. We've been meeting for several years, and I can't believe it's just like 2 years away. It's comes up so fast, it's for sure. And the last thing I would like to say is that OMA is super supportive of anything that Amy does, and especially anything that this museum does. I love all 500 museums in our state, but this one might be a little more special to me personally. And Dr. Bob was talking about the Bronco Theater. My husband is from Edmond. He was born it's Othello's now, but downstairs was the Bronco Theater. Upstairs was the hospital. My husband was born in that hospital in 1957. Is that not hilarious? So he was like, what movie was playing downstairs? I was like, the museum will know. In their archives, they can look it up for you. So anyways, OMA is very supportive of this project, of Amy and all. So now it's my privilege to get to introduce Shelley. I'll put on my glasses so I won't mess your introduction up. All right. As Secretary of Tourism, Wildlife, and Heritage, and Executive Director of the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department, Shelley Zumwalt is a powerful voice in Oklahoma state government and brings with her a rich history of state service through her passionate commitment to driving change in government. And thank you for doing that. Born and raised in Oklahoma, Secretary Zumwalt's journey in public service began over a decade ago. Prior to her time leading state tourism, Zumwalt led the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission, and during a crazy time during COVID, we all remember that. Secretary Zumwalt is committed to making the state a top-tier destination by showcasing its beauty, culture, and heritage. In 2024, Governor Stitt named Zumwalt as the Secretary of Tourism, Wildlife, and Heritage, where she currently oversees the operations of more than 15 state agencies, boards, and commissions, many close to our heart in this room, including the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation, the Oklahoma Arts Council, the Oklahoma Route 66 Commission, the Oklahoma Historical Society, the Greenwood Area Redevelopment Authority, and more. Please help me welcome Secretary Zumwalt.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Brenda and I had the pleasure of working together on the Route 66 Commission. And I have to tell you, if you ever get a chance to be on a commission with her, celebrate it, because she's amazing. And I'm really lucky to be able to serve with her. It's so funny. Brenda said she doesn't have any favorites as far as museums. And I don't have any favorites as far as places I get to speak, technically. But I was born and raised in Norman, but I graduated from UCO. So both Norman and Edmond are two of my favorites because I feel like I'm going home and it feels a little bit more like family when I get to go to those two places. So I say that to you to say I've had a lot of love for Edmond, and I'm really fortunate that I got to live here too. I know everyone in this room is super passionate about museums, the CCC, and everything that goes along with that. But your support of this initiative and really your support overall in preservation is something I can't thank you enough for, because it's really important when it comes to the work I do. Many of the things that I'm going to talk about today have started the process to be repaired. But that's, as you know, you're never completed. There's never a point where you're like, great, everything's fine. Because there's always something else that you need to give attention to or funding to, or really, get a plan going for, because if it's not us that takes care of it, the generations that come after us will have just pictures to look at. And I don't want to be the person that lets that generation down. I have one daughter, and she, whether she likes it or not, she's a teenager. Whether it sparks her interest or not, the CCC is something that I have talked to her about, and why it's important, and why that time period when so much changed and happened, why we look to that as a guidepost for how we can go on into the future. And with that, my personal piece of information is done, and we can talk about state parks. But I want to give one caveat. This PowerPoint, I haven't seen it yet. So if I'm talking about one thing and it's not the same thing on the screen, I apologize. But we're going to get through this, and it's really interesting. And without a doubt, you'll see all of this stuff. It just might not be in the right sequence. As you guys probably know, we have many civilian Conservation Corps projects in our state parks, but the core ones are in our 7 original parks. And those parks are, and I'm gonna look at my notes when I say this, Quartz Mountain, Osage Hills, Roman Nose, Boiling Springs, Beaver's Bend, Lake Murray, and Robbers Cave. And those beautiful structures are something that draw people from all over the world. And without a doubt, for me personally, I remember traveling to Roman Nose when I was a kid, and the bathhouse that's there. I remember seeing that as a child, because we have our family reunions at state parks. And when I went back recently to see it over the past couple of months, it broke my heart. It broke my heart, because there's fence all around it. Things are in disrepair. It was just, I was so disheartened. But the reason why I can stand here today and not be apologizing for it is we finally got funding and repairs and a plan approved so that we can fix that and use it and preserve it. And I think that's part of what this is here today, is we have structures that may or may not fit how we live today. So how do we repurpose those? How do we restore them? How do we make sure that we've got the core of those projects and we're using them so that so that my teenager can experience it today? That's the exciting part. I'll get to a picture, I believe, of Roman Nose, if we're lucky, here in just a second, because I'm not very good going off of notes, to be honest with you. I have a lot of the stuff in my head, but since I have a PowerPoint, I'm kind of trying to stick with it, so bear with me. We have 8 native stone cabins built by the CCC at Osage Hills State Park, and you can stay in those today. Has anyone in here ever stayed in those? Awesome. Wonderful. They're beautiful, they're amazing, and you're able to step back into history. We also just finished renovation of 2 of the CCC cabins at Robbers Cave that are open now and available for someone to stay there. Those projects took, I think, right around 2 years to restore all of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. In addition, we have, our 7 original parks, but Greenleaf, which wasn't an original park and is in the Northeast, that park, I'm gonna go and go on my slide and see if I have one here. There's the Robbers Cave renovations. Just beautiful cabins. They were all restored using the original materials, or materials that are of the likeness if we could not repurpose those original materials. There is additionally the culvert at Greenleaf. And this was interesting. When I first took the job, Greenleaf was one of the first parks I went to. And it's in the Northeast. If you haven't been there, it's a beautiful place. And that's when I got my first lesson in how to restore projects that are part of the historical preservation code. And how do we go in there and try to find materials that were maybe used then, or mimic, products that were used then. And so whenever I see this picture, it takes me back to October of 2022. It's probably not impressive to anyone else but me, but I remember just soaking up all that energy and information of this is how we do this right, because it's really important. Speaking of Greenleaf, there's another picture of the restoration. and then the Roman nose bath, the bathhouse. I'm going to stick with Greenleaf though, because there is, it's not one of the original 7, but it was also built by the WPA. There's one cabin that's there that we just restored that's gorgeous. I was just talking about it, and I got to see it before, in progress, and then it was when it was finished, and it's just gorgeous. It's right on the lake. It's right on the water. If you get a chance to stay there, book early because it's pretty popular. Moving on to Roman nose. The bathhouse here obviously is something that we probably will not restore exactly as a bathhouse, right? That's one of those examples that's kind of unique of how do we use this in a way that modern travelers can utilize it and it's still maintained. And so with this one particularly, we are going to keep, oh, that's the end of my slideshow again. We'll just stay right there. We're going to restore the structure, but we're also going to make it part of an open air pavilion so people can utilize that for, events or family reunions or whatever they can. And I think that's a great example of how do we preserve the past, but also make it something that's not stagnant, that we're just, it's almost like a museum piece. That has its place and its purpose. And there's parts of the bathhouse that probably will be not open for everyday traffic, but we also want people to experience it today. And that's been a fun part of my job is how do we, trusting our construction team and our designers and our planners, how do we say, what is the best use of this, respecting the original work that was there? And I'm really excited about this project. Honestly, it went through, I have years of design work on my notes, but it predates me. It was one of those that went through quite a few different hands to get to the point where we are today. And I'm excited to see the final result, because seeing it the other day and so much disrepair, it was disheartening. And I'm glad to be part of the solution that will keep it preserved. So in looking at our CCC projects that are in these state parks, I don't know if there is one right now that I can tell you besides Robbers Cave and the other projects that have been restored that they're all, in great shape and they're completely restored. And that kind of goes for a lot of the things in our state parks. When we're looking at how do we decide how to go forward in the future, it's really important that we have a plan for our state parks. Coming into this job, there wasn't one. I'm going to be really upfront about it. There wasn't a plan for how do we preserve not only the CCC projects, but also the projects that we need to just restore so that people are safe when they come and visit our parks. And looking forward to the future, I'm committed personally to having a plan that includes our CCC projects, but also all of our state parks, because there's other projects within there that the Army Corps of Engineers have worked on that are really important for the future to understand, the future of our state to understand, but also for preservation. And when you look at how much money does the state have to fund deferred maintenance for these state parks, including CCC projects, right now we only have less than $10 million for $1 billion in assets. And if you ask anyone that has managed property, that is not going to work. Stuff is going to fall apart really quickly. And so one of the goals that I have this session is working with the legislature to figure out how do we raise the funding cap on that deferred maintenance fund that's currently set at just over $9 million. But twin to that is also we have a promotional fund which promotes all of this for the state. I'd be lying to you if I said that this isn't part of a bigger picture. Being able to talk to this group of people about the CCC is truly something that is important to me, but also part of that is talking about how do we move forward in a responsible way so there is money to make sure that these projects are funded. And currently, as far as the promotion side of promoting all the beautiful things of our state, promoting Edmond, promoting Route 66, and preserving all of these structures, there's not enough money going towards it for us to be successful in the future. And that's why speaking to this group, it's really important that we talk about what does that plan look like? How do we go forward? What is that right amount of money to make sure that we have a plan and that we can preserve the structures that are there? And so we'll be working with the legislature this session to remove the cap that is on the, it's an apportionment cap on sales tax and use tax, to remove the cap that was placed there. Bless you. Remove the cap that was placed there during a revenue failure, because essentially the state has been operating like we're in a revenue failure as far as money going toward deferred maintenance for our state parks and the money used to promote our state. I'm not going to get too wonky on you on this one. I'm going to go into some other stuff that's super exciting. But I want people in this room to understand that when we are talking about how do we expand Oklahoma and really get grow our economy and produce economic activity, tourism is our third largest industry. I'll say that again because people are always like, really? Are you sure? I'm sure. I'm positive. I wouldn't lie to you guys. It is our third largest industry. And as far as bringing money into the state, tourism's second only to oil and gas in the number of out-of-state dollars that we bring into the state. That's tremendous. And the state parks are a big part of that. If you ask any small city that has a state park in it, that's the hub of economic activity for that city. Most of their jobs are coming from that state park. A lot of the different vendor opportunities are coming from that state park. The grocer that's down the street has a really big day when there's an event at the state park. And so this all fits together in a very symbiotic way, but there hasn't been a big push, I think, in the past few decades to say, we support our state parks and we support the structures that are in them. And we want to make sure that in a fiscally responsible way, we are putting money towards the preservation of those structures. And the same goes for Route 66. It's something that when you look at the ROI for marketing, there's a 60-to-1 return on investment for marketing dollars spent in marketing Oklahoma. 60-to-1. I don't have anything else I can say that about. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that was an outlier. And so when we're talking about that promotional fund, it's right now at $5.75 million. If you look comparatively at the region, Arkansas has just over $20 million and Texas has over $50 million. We're just getting crushed, but we're still getting a 60-to-1 ROI. So if you think about how do we, looking to the future, how do we fund all of these projects so that we are funding preservation? That's a big part of being able to do it, is the revenue that's generated from those marketing dollars towards marketing the state with that 60-to-1 ROI. Speaking about Route 66, I do have to tell you a small story because this was another thing. When you grow up in Oklahoma and then you become the tourism director, it's maybe the best day ever. I love my job. I love it more than any other job I've had. And I've been lucky enough to say that about a lot of jobs. But I'm so passionate about it. And when I came to this job, it was like every single day for, I don't know, months on end, there was something new that I discovered that I was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. And I remember that from when I was a kid. So a lot of these things that I talk about are things that have a personal tie to me. And I have a rule, there's a couple of people in my family I don't talk about because it makes me a little bit emotional. So I apologize, but my grandfather is one of them. But his house was on the old Route 66. And he's unfortunately passed, but the piece of that ties it all into the CCC is also that whenever he's the one that kind of got me excited about the CCC projects. And he grew up, like many people in my generation, their grandparents lived through the Depression, and he had polio, and his brother was like 6'2", and my grandfather, it stunted his growth because he was in bed and a lot of other things happened. So he was a little bit shorter than I am. And his brother was super tall. And if you look at my wedding picture, it's like me and my husband, and then everyone else is like this tall, including my grandfather. But he was so passionate about these projects because he said they were a point of hope for him when he was sick. Like hearing about all these things that were going on all over was something that really, it just was a spark for him. And so I carry in myself that passion for these projects, but also for Route 66, because he was always so proud that his house was built on the old Route 66. And it's something that has generated more revenue for our state than I think probably any other initiative has. Don't quote me on that because I'm not going back and looking in history, but when we're talking about international visitors, for the last calendar year, we had more international visitors than ever before. and they're looking for that, authentic Americana experience. And Oklahoma has more miles than any other state. We are ground zero for Route 66. Brenda and I have been working on projects that are the most fun projects ever. We're talking about throwing a big party for Route 66. Could that be more fun? I mean, like, that's our job. It's amazing. But also getting to be a cheerleader for the state is one of those things that it makes me so proud to be able to say, no, I'm advocating for Oklahoma to hold the party. We should hold the party. We are the biggest Route 66 state, right? And when we look at how do we do that, a lot of that ties back into how are we marketing the state? Are we going to be ready for that party, right? We can't have our state parks falling apart and saying, hey, guess what? We have state parks all along Route 66. But don't stay in those couple because they're not looking really good right now. It's something that we really have to be prepared for, and we have to be, we got to put our best foot forward. And I'm going to go back to that promotional fund because I think this is an important point. Right now, we have $5.75 million to market the whole state, right? The Route 66 fund is funded at $6.6 million for just Route 66. I'm not saying that's bad. I think that's great. But right now we have more money to market Route 66 than we do the entire state. And that's why this is important, is because the pieces of that puzzle should all fit together. We should be able to have those two things not competing with each other, right? We should be able to market the state on a platform that is proper, but also is going to put our best foot forward for the Centennial. Let me look through my notes here to make sure I got everything for you guys. When we're looking at record-breaking stats like that 60-to-1 ROI, when I'm talking to people, I always like to give them kind of, a couple of nuggets to take away. And this one piece of information, I actually didn't know it before walking in here, but then these numbers just came in last week. In 2022, our state parks generated $343 million in travel spending for the state. That's tremendous. And it generated $23 million in state and local taxes. That is giving money back to the citizens of Oklahoma. That is something that I think that we can all agree has value to all of us. And it generated, they're supporting over 3,000 jobs all over the state. This is a tremendous driver of economic activity, not just in those rural areas, but in some of the smaller cities, and even Norman that has Lake Thunderbird. We're seeing people that are coming to the state just to go to those state parks and experience it. And that's super exciting, but it takes money to maintain them. Right now, just to make sure that we have accounted for the foot traffic, there's a dollar figure that we have to really calculate to figure out, just for someone coming in and spending no money other than the parking pass, do we even cover the cost of that? And so whatever is left over from that is for that money that's for that deferred maintenance. And right now we are in the red. So with that, I've got one more minute. I won't give you any more stat. They told me, they were like, hey, they're going to give you a clock, they're going to give you a time, and then they're going to buzzer you if you don't stop. So I'm ready for that. I want to tell you, I gave you a lot of information. I love crowds like this. It's one of my favorite things I get to do. CCC is such an important project and such an important part of our history that if there's ever an opportunity that I can talk some more about it for you or answer your questions, please let me know. Like I said, I'm really lucky. I love my job and I can talk for a long time unless they cut me off. And with that, I'll tell you thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
I met Kyle in 2014, and we realized that the CCC unit who worked at Osage Hills in the 1930s had first worked at the Oklahoma City Zoo, where I was then the historian. So it was Kyle, myself, and Sherry Vance that brainstormed about this symposium nearly 8 years ago. So I'm so thrilled that Kyle can share his knowledge with you. Kyle?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy. And yes, that was a long time back and it's finally happening. So thank you all for coming today. I'm following on the shadow of dignitaries today, including my boss, which is just up here. But I'm merely just a foot soldier in this operation. So I'd like to start out by saying that while I do work for Oklahoma State Parks, I'm here today as one of the organizers of the event as a citizen, as a civilian. And any views or opinions I express are my own and not meant to represent the views or opinions of the Department of Tourism or Oklahoma State Parks. And then also in deference to Dr. Blackburn, I love him so much. He said I'd be talking about CCC history, so I'm tempted to throw out my notes and just talk about that. But I was asked to speak about some successes I've had in my park, so I probably better stick with that. So, forestry engineer from Senegal, Baba Diom, said, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." A few years back, a woman came to the park and she was asking for information about her father who had served in the CCCs. And she didn't have a lot to go on. She had just a couple of pictures, and she had her father's name and said, "What can you tell me about my father?" She said, "When I was young, my dad would talk about his time in the CCCs, and it embarrassed me so much. I would tell him to stop, or if I was in the room, I'd leave it. I couldn't handle it. He would say the CCCs, he'd say Civilian Conservation Corps in his pictures. She said, I think, was he in CCC camp? Was that like a concentration camp? What put him there? He's wearing a uniform and has the implements of a chain gang. Was he in some sort of trouble? Was he incarcerated?" And she didn't understand that. She didn't have that understanding, and so she didn't have that love. One time she was on her way home from school. There's a fence out in the front yard. It's knocked down. 2 tire tracks through it. Her dad's pickup truck is up against the porch of the house. Ambulance is in the driveway. Her father had suffered a major heart attack and had died there at the wheel, stopped by the house. And she never had that opportunity to ask him about that history. She had, prior to that, she had every opportunity until that opportunity wasn't there. In the end, we conserve only what we love only what we understand, and understand only what we're taught. If only we can be taught in time. Today, Osage Hills State Park is known as the CCC Park, as one of the original 7, but it hasn't always been that way. In 2006, when I started at Osage Hills, the staff knew that the CCC had created that park. They knew also that up on the hill had been a CCC camp. Somewhere up there, there's a disused amphitheater. Somewhere in that vicinity is where some young men lived. Certainly the number wasn't known. They knew some basics about the camp because there's a granite marker there in the driveway of the office. So just a passing glance would tell you that something happened there. Photos, blueprints, those have been thrown away over time. We have some Xeroxes of some old prints that the park used to have. They're no longer there. And despite several reunions that were held at the park of the CCC alumni, no one recorded any stories or any histories, at least not on paper. There are some anecdotally. Sometimes I didn't even mark down who was in attendance. There's a dynamite shack along one of the trails. That was known. It was known as a dynamite shack, but there was little knowledge why we would need dynamite in the park in the first place. A short time after hiring on, we have a scenic overlook. If you've been out there to the park, you go up on top of the hill, sandstone, just a nice big overlook. And I was up on top of that, and I saw there in the floor a couple of cracks. I said, "Man, that looks like a door." I got down there and dusted off, and there's actually a handle there. I said, "Wow, what is this? I've stomped my foot." You can do it today. You can go up there and stomp your foot. It's hollow. I said, "Man, what's underneath that door?" I don't know. I was thinking maybe one of these nights I'll get a engine hoist and I'll go up there and just crack it just a little and see. Maybe it's a time capsule. Maybe there's 1937 Ford Coupe, a Sportster. Man, that'd be a find. Maybe it's gold bullion. So, well, to give a spoiler alert, it's the original water tower for the park, and it contains 2 galvanized steel tanks there. But the structures were there. They were merely seen as structures, not as links to our past. They weren't seen as a symbol of our nation's resilience. They weren't linked to the builders, to the young men who lived out there, who left their homes to go work in the wilderness, a place that for many of them, they had certainly never spent much time. Many of them sending money home. It's the only thing keeping their family in the home. In the end, we can serve only what we love only what we understand, and understand only what we're taught. I recognize that there was a gulf there between what the park is and what it should be. And one of my first objectives was to find out about the Civilian Conservation Corps and their work within the park. And one of the first things I did, well, as I said, I'm a foot soldier. I don't have any funding or P card or anything like that. So I got to do it all on the down low. But one of the first things I did is went out and did some oral history interviews with some of the men who are still alive. This turned out to be wonderful, especially this one with Oscar Renfro. I put this in each of the cabins. Within a week, other than trails, it was the most talked about item in the office. People would come in and say, tell me more about that. Where was this camp? What's the CCC? Well, it turned out that the folks in the office didn't have all the answers at that time. They kind of cart led the horse, but it inspired us to do more. It also gave an opportunity for merchandising. Once this went into the cabins, we were able to start selling patches, things like that in our gift shop and really focusing on it. Well, we really weren't hearing in 2006, 2007, we weren't hearing Original 7. We were just existing like the other CCC parks. From that, went to the National Archives. I was able to find some of that background that was lost. Menus, progress reports, things like that. Give a more full picture. Well, with that, I was able to go out and really give some relevance to the work that was done. Found out about some injuries that were out there. And being able to bring a more wholesome story to the park just furthered our ability to tell the story of the young men. And finally, because of that, we had volunteers that said, we love this park. What can we do? What can we do to help out? Or they see some of the work up at the CCC camp, which, by the way, now we know is not where they thought it was. It's actually off to the west a little bit. Once that started being lined out, we had scout groups that came in. Eagle Scout troops came in. Methodist men's group came out to use some of their equipment they used in a disaster to keep well with that. We had just families that loved the park. Up at that CCC camp, there's not too much left. It was taken up and sent over to New Mexico after the camp closed down. And when that happened, they essentially just put the ground back to how it was. But under 6, 7, 8 inches of duff, we can now find the sandstone, the flagstone pathways that link those buildings together. And starting last year, we started clearing out that CCC camp with the idea of lining out where those original buildings were. Put a post there with the QR code so that as we learn more, we don't have to reprint documentation. We can just change it online and further bring people in to the group to educate them on the CCC. Now, those I find are successes, essentially rags to riches of just knowing about the CCC to being where many of our repeat guests come in specifically inquiring about the Civilian Conservation Corps. Some of the challenges are that state parks frequently uses New Deal or CCC imagery for promotion, but it's not always proactive about conserving and preserving those assets. Well, we just heard Ms. Zumwalt was talking about the funding and maintenance deficits, the cost for maintenance and repairs. It's not always possible to put all the monies everywhere all at once. It's just not there. There's also the practicalities. It would be great if I had 200 young men standing there ready for work. That'd be wonderful. If I could even have that for a week, that would be quite the asset. Our structures, some no longer serve a practical purpose. There's difficulty in converting them to ADA accessibility, handicap or handy-capable compliance. The original purpose is no longer linked in some cases to an activity that we do at the park, like refectories, bubblers. We don't even use those words anymore, much less the places. Also, sometimes our staff and administrators don't recognize the importance of the structures. And finally, there's sometimes a lack of imagination in repurposing structures. It's sometimes not always lack of funding, but just a matter of asking how else can this be used. And we can see right over here, I'm so happy it was left up, the repurposing of the Roman nose bathhouse. It can happen, we just have to ask those questions. So state parks are presented with a tremendous opportunity to showcase the works of the Civilian Conservation Corps. And we're in a position to be keepers of that flame. We don't have exclusive claim, to be sure, but we certainly showcase some of the more iconic structures and stories. Those stories and those structures are just a vestige of what the CCC has gifted to us. In the fall, we promote a fall foliage tour. That's in southeast Oklahoma, where if you had visited back in the 1930s, you would have you would find most of those mountainsides would have been clear cut of vegetation. Thanks to the CCC's reforestation work, those are now wonderful to look at. We can once again promote them. When Osage Hills camp shut down, many of those enrollees were moved to Broken Arrow, to a camp over there. There's nothing to show there. Their work was with the Soil Conservation Service. What you have now is that you have a farmer's field that's terraced. That when we had those winds yesterday, we didn't have a big wall of topsoil rolling at us. That was held in place, but you can't go up and really touch that topsoil. You can't touch the terrace and say this was 18-year-olds. This is 17-year-olds. They were keeping their family in a home. It's difficult to do that. From Ponca City on westward. In the 1930s, gullies big enough to swallow both man and tractor, even today's tractors. They were big. The CCC went in there, filled those up, and helped prevent erosion. Can't really touch that. You just see that the tractor can go unmolested along the field. We can go on, rural electrification, social connection through phone lines, property values, through fire suppression, access to recreation, to better hygiene. It's a long list. But despite these truly great monumental works, it's difficult to point at them and understand their relevance. But in the parks, we have great works that were done by these young men. That's a microcosm of their successes and in some cases their failures. But we have something tangible. It's like an iceberg, right? You just see the 10% that's above the water. The bulwark, the mass of it is below. I really feel like that's something that's lost about the CCC is of the tremendous works that they do. Sometimes we take that down to just the structures that remain. But there's a bigger story to tell, but we can touch the rocks. Now we have the stories, state parks have the stories, the blueprints, and we have their lasting legacy. And the time is now and continuing through the next 10 years to decide, well, first, I guess, to decide if we'll preserve and promote the legacy. And of course, your presence here today makes me think, well, there's a good chance of that, so thank you. And if we preserve and promote this legacy, the time is now to decide to what extent we'll do it and how we'll do it. Because in the end, we'll conserve only what we love only what we understand, and we'll understand only what we're taught. So let's go teach. But first, let's go eat. All right. Thank you all.